Hey, good morning, Great Oaks Church. If you have a Bible, you can open to Mark chapter 1. We're going to be starting in verse 21 here in a minute. But Mark chapter 1 is where we're going to be. We value opening the Bible and seeing what God's Word has for us and teaching us. It's good to be with you today. If we haven't met, my name is Max Juergens. I am the director of the Salt Company here at Great Oaks Church, which, if you were unaware, is the college ministry of Great Oaks. And so it's summertime. A lot of students are home for the summer, but a few are here, and so I love that. I have a question for you all this morning. A question for you all. How would you describe your ideal Saturday? Like yesterday for you, how would you describe your ideal Saturday? What would be ideal for you? Think about your ideal Saturday. And while you think about it, let me just tell you my ideal Saturday quick. My ideal Saturday starts with me sleeping in until 9 a.m. And then I'm gonna wake up and shower and put clothes on, but then I'm gonna go make breakfast. I'm gonna make breakfast sandwiches for my wife Ashley and I, and then I'm gonna make sausage for Della. She loves sausage. And then maybe middle of the morning, we're gonna go for a walk. If it's nice out, if it's not, we'll go to a coffee shop in town or something like that. We love coffee. And then for lunch, we'll go to one of two of my favorite places to eat, either Culver's or Jimmy John's. Culver's if I'm feeling like I can feel horrible later. Jimmy John's if I feel like I don't want to feel horrible later. So we'd go to one of those two places for lunch, and then we'd head home, maybe take a nap, catch up on the golf tournament. That's what I did yesterday, was caught up on the golf tournament. So catch up on the golf tournament, and then in the afternoon, maybe we'd do some tidying of the house, cleaning up the house, the kitchen, the laundry, our rooms, trash out of our cars. If you've ever rode with me or seen my car, you know I don't do that much, and so that's why I'm saying it would be my ideal Saturday if I did that. And so I'd take the trash out of my car, and then to end the day, maybe we take another walk, maybe a sunset walk, as the girls like to say, golden hour walk. Have some snacky stuff for dinner, maybe watch a movie, watch a show, relax, and then go to bed. That's my ideal Saturday for you. I don't know what yours would look like, but that's my ideal Saturday. A full day, a great day of Ashley and Della and I spending some time together, resting, eating good food. If every Saturday looked like that, it would be amazing for me. I would feel like I killed every single Saturday. And I'd also feel like it was a full day and I accomplished so much. I didn't waste any time during the day. It was a productive day. So what would your ideal Saturday be? What would you fill your Saturday with? This morning, we're gonna look at another Saturday. And this Saturday was a Saturday that Jesus spent in a town called Capernaum. And like my ideal Saturday, it was a full day. Jesus' morning, afternoon, and evening were completely full. It was an incredible day. But what made Jesus' Saturday a great and ideal day for him is probably different than mine and yours. This Saturday, Jesus spent the entire day healing people. From sunrise to sunset, he spent the entire day healing people. And as we read about this Saturday, we're gonna learn 3 truths from Jesus' healing ministry. 3 truths from his healing ministry. First, Jesus is the healer of big things. He's the healer of big things, things like demon possession. Second, we're gonna see that he's the healer of small things, a fever. And third, we're gonna see that he's the healer of all. People from the whole town of Capernaum came to him. 3 truths of Jesus' healing displayed in one day. Jesus is the healer of the big, healer of the small, the healer of all. The story starts in Mark 1:21, which is where we're gonna see the first truth. Jesus is the healer of the big. And so here's how his day starts. It says this in verse 21. They went into Capernaum, and right away he entered the synagogue on the Sabbath day and began to teach. They were astonished at his teaching because he was teaching them as one who had authority and not like the scribes. Just then a man with an unclean spirit was in their synagogue. He cried out, "What do you have to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." And the unclean spirit threw him into convulsions, shouted with a loud voice, and came out of him. They were all amazed, and so they began to ask each other, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. At once, the news about him spread throughout the entire vicinity of Galilee. Okay, what do we see? How does the day begin? How does Jesus' Saturday begin? Well, we see that Jesus, and at this point, his 4 disciples enter Capernaum together. And Mark tells us that they entered the synagogue on the Sabbath day. Jesus began to teach, and that his teaching was incredible, right? Taught with authority, unlike the scribes. We see that Jesus was different. He spoke differently. He had a different kind of impact than anyone else. Jesus was already starting to show the authority, show that his authority was different from anyone who had taught in that synagogue. It's quite a start to the day. Right away, they enter the synagogue and he preaches like no one has before. This is the first experience that those 4 disciples had with him. Quite a start to the day. And the crowds notice it. They've never experienced anything like this. But it gets better, right? A man with an unclean spirit, a demon-possessed man, as I'm going to say, walks into the synagogue. He challenges Jesus, right? Verse 24, what do you have to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. The demon knows who he is. He challenges him or taunts him in whatever way, whatever he's doing. And without saying anything else, Jesus rebukes him by just saying, be silent and come out of him. The demon does some weird exit thing and left the man, right? What a crazy thing. A crazy event in the synagogue. A man entered the synagogue and Jesus just said these few simple words and the demon left, just like that. Crazy event. But before we move any further, I want to imagine what this guy's life would have been like. And maybe you can't. It's hard for us to imagine that. I mean, Stephen talked about it on Easter Sunday. Mary Magdalene, who was at one point possessed by 7 demons. And if you remember, he gave a few ideas of what we could imagine that being like. Mark gives us a couple other stories of demon possession in this gospel. Later on in chapter 5, he tells the story of a man possessed by legion, which is many demons, and he lives among the tombs. And he cuts himself. And he has this crazy superhuman strength. Later in chapter 9, there's a story of a boy who's demon-possessed, and it causes seizures, foaming at the mouth, and that it even tries to kill him. We see in this story, in verse 26, it says that it threw him into convulsions, shouted with a loud voice, and came out of him. Maybe that was part of what he had experienced. Maybe just shouting with a loud voice, being thrown into convulsions randomly. But whatever it is, it was horrible. It would have been safe to say that this man experienced some terrible things being possessed by this demon. And there may be some things worse than this, but this man was extremely broken. Demon possession is maybe the worst of spiritual brokenness anyone could experience. Now, we might not experience many things like this today, like they did then, but there are definitely some really broken things people deal with today. There's some extremely broken and heartbreaking things today. Many people have experienced brokenness with their families. Maybe you grew up in a broken home, a home where there was just one parent, or maybe you don't know your biological parents and they've never been in the picture, and they still aren't. Some people have experienced the brokenness of divorce or the brokenness of abuse or adultery. Many people have experienced the brokenness of mental health, anxiety and depression, or suicidal ideation, or even attempted suicide. Many people have dealt with the brokenness of addiction to drugs or alcohol or pornography, to name a few. And maybe that's not you, but someone you're close with, or even maybe you live with or you're married to, deals with those things or something like that. This world is unbelievably broken. Humanity is unbelievably broken in so many ways. And I know there's worse ways that our world is broken other than those things. But what this man experienced is without a doubt one of the worst cases of brokenness in that day. But his story didn't end that way. He didn't end his life possessed by a demon. This man was healed by Jesus. Jesus simply just cast the demon out. An incredible thing. In the snap of a finger, cast him out. Jesus has incredible authority to do those kinds of things. So what does this say about Jesus? What is the truth from this Saturday morning in Capernaum? What is the truth of Jesus? Well, Jesus is the healer of big things. Nothing is too big for Jesus. There isn't a crisis he can't bring peace to. There isn't anything that Jesus is overwhelmed by. Jesus can bring healing to anything. That's the truth we see here. I also don't want to miss something else. Where was this man? Where was he? He was in the synagogue. Think about this. The synagogue was like the present day church for them. This is where they went to hear the teachings of God, to listen to the law. And who was there? A demon. A man possessed by a demon. This place was like the church, the way we know the church, a place where they came, learned about God, and a demon was there. That's kind of a creepy thing to think about. That level of brokenness was in the synagogue. That's crazy. But here's the truth. We have a lot of brokenness in this room. We have a lot of brokenness sitting in this room. This room isn't a room where everyone has everything figured out. Great Oaks Church is not a church where people have things figured out. This room is full of brokenness. Churches are full of broken people. Maybe some of those things I listed above you could resonate with. Maybe you grew up in a broken family. You've been split between two homes. Maybe you felt the pain of divorce. Maybe you've dealt with hard mental health things. You struggle with anxiety or depression. Maybe you've dealt with addiction, or you are right now. The good news from this story is that there is nothing too big for Jesus. We are a church of broken people. People with big things that we need to be healed of. And Jesus has the authority to do that. He's the healer of big things. His authority and power is unmatched. He healed the demon-possessed man. He can heal your brokenness. That's the first truth that we see on this Saturday. Jesus is the healer of big things. There's nothing too big for him. Now, a lot of us would agree that that's true and that we believe it. Jesus is the healer of big things, and there's nothing that he can't heal. But I think that some of us deal with this issue or this train of thought. Some of us think that if it's not a big enough issue, I shouldn't bother Jesus with it. I know I struggle with this. This thing I'm dealing with, I should be able to deal with it on my own. I should be able to provide my own healing. I only go to Jesus when I need him most. And these small things, I need to figure those out on my own because I should be able to. As I was studying this week, Stephen brought up something interesting. He brought up how music in our culture supports this train of thought. A lot of lyrics in the music we listen to supports this train of thought. That I should only go to God when it's big enough and I need his help. And going to God is the right thing, for sure. But we often think that we're supposed to handle these small issues by ourselves. Listen to these lyrics. This is Jelly Roll's song, I Need a Favor. He starts the song by singing, I only talk to God when I need a favor. In the song Pray by Sam Smith, he talks about how his world's on fire, how he has dread in his heart, fear in his bones, and then he says, maybe I'll just pray. I've never believed in you, but I'm going to pray. The song Preacher by One Republic, Stephen sent me this one. This line in it says this, God only helps those who learn to help themselves. if we were to evaluate ourselves, I think we would realize that in one way or another, this is true of us. That maybe we've fallen into this thought before, that I only go to God when it's big enough. But look at what happens in verse 29. The second part of the day for Jesus in Capernaum. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went to Simon and Andrew's house with James and John. Simon's mother-in-law was lying in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he went to her, took her by the hand, and raised her up. The fever left her, and she began to serve them. Second part of the day. Jesus goes to Simon's house. Simon would later be known as Peter. He's the only disciple that's married, but his mother-in-law has a fever. And so Jesus went, took her by the hand, and healed her. Again, another incredible display of the authority and power Jesus has to cure a fever. Incredible authority. But to be honest, if we were going to compare it to casting out a demon, we might be tempted to think it's insignificant, that it's not a big issue. Because, I've had a fever before. I had one a couple weeks ago, and it wasn't fun. I know what that feels like, and I know how to deal with it. But probably just lay down like Peter's mother-in-law, drink water, essential oils, or whatever. That's my one for the day, Stephen. Sorry. Fevers aren't fun. But most of the time, we know what to do to get rid of them. We know how to treat them. More than likely, Peter's mother-in-law would have probably been okay. And I know people have died from a fever, but she probably would have been okay. So why did Jesus do this, and why did Mark record this in his gospel? It's because he doesn't only care about the big things, he also cares about the small things. He cares about the small. He's going to heal Peter's mother-in-law. There's nothing too small for Jesus. There's nothing too insignificant to ask Jesus to heal. And we forget this. For some reason, probably because we trust ourselves and not Jesus in some sort of way, we minimize what we ask for from him. We minimize our prayers to only the big things. Or maybe for some of us, we subconsciously think, I need to save up my prayers for the big one that I'm going to ask him. Because we think we can only bother Jesus when it's absolutely necessary. Or for some of us, we think that Jesus is going to be upset when we ask him for something. Put yourselves in the shoes of Peter or in the shoes of his wife. What would you have done? It says that they told Jesus right away when she had a fever. So that's what they did. But what do you think you would have done if you were Peter? I think I know what I would have done, knowing myself, right? Jesus just casts out this demon in the synagogue. This is like one of the first interactions I have with Jesus. I guess that's what Jesus has come here to do. My mother-in-law's fever, probably insignificant. I don't need to bother Jesus with that, right? She's probably going to be okay. And I love my mother-in-law. Julie Kissenmacher is an incredible woman, but she would probably be okay with a fever. I wouldn't put it by me that I would react that way, that's the way I would respond. Maybe you would say the same thing. How do we think Jesus is going to respond? We think he's going to respond with, really? You can't take care of yourself? Again, you're asking? That's not who he is. We treat him like he's some annoyed parent, but that's not who he is. What does he do? He responds immediately. He goes over to her, he heals the fever, and he helps her up. Jesus doesn't just respond and intervene in the big things that we need healed of. He heals the small. He slows down, has compassion, and heals the person with the fever. Jesus heals small things. When I was in high school, I got to see something similar to this play out in my job. So I got hired as a cart kid at Legacy Golf Club in Norwalk, Iowa. That's where I grew up. And I got to see this play out with the owner and GM of the golf course named Travis Manning. He was a great guy. I got hired as a 17-year-old, like I said. I was a cart kid, so I was in charge of taking care of the carts along with a couple other things. But the big thing was clean carts, scorecard, pencil, park them, plug them in, make it look beautiful and everything. It was my first summer as a cart kid, and it was my first summer interacting with Travis, right? Like, he's the owner of the golf course. And that summer, he had a lot on his plate. And the big thing he was working on that summer was, I need to hire a director of golf. And that's a big deal. Director of golf, they're the number 2 guy or girl at the place. They run basically probably the golf side of things while Travis works on like all the GM type of things. But he was like, I need to hire a director of golf. Super massive responsibility, a huge role to fill. And it would have been easy for him to not pay attention to me, a kid who frankly was struggling getting all these carts cleaned and put away in good time. So the thing that we tried to avoid was having 20 to 25 deep of carts that we needed to clean right outside the cart barn. That happened, and traffic was terrible. And so I remember it was one Friday night, 6 p.m., I want to go home. We're 20, 25 deep outside the cart barn, and Travis at 6 p.m. on a Friday night comes out of his office, comes down to the cart barn, and helps me and another guy clean all the carts, and we get it done in half the time that it would have took me and the other guy. Get everything put away, and he's like, all right, you guys can go home. I'm going to go work on my thing. What? That's incredible. It was incredible, and that happened many more times that year. He had way bigger fish to fry. He needed to hire a director of golf. He was the GM and the owner, our boss. He needed to hire someone to take care of us, but he came down and made sure we didn't run into a major problem. We had a small issue. He had huge issues that he needed to fix. But time and time again, as the summer went on, that was true of Travis Manning. How much more incredible is it that the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords slowed down in the midst of all that was going on? He had way bigger issues to worry about, way bigger things that he needed to do. But he slowed down and to care and to heal Peter's mother-in-law. Jesus isn't too busy or too bothered for the small thing we ask of him. He's willing to slow down and to care for our requests. There's nothing too small for Jesus. He cares about everything that we struggle with. He cares about every little battle we're in. He's there to enter in with love and care. We don't need to be afraid to ask. In fact, we should probably be more like Peter and the disciples and just say, hey, Jesus, he's got a fever, she's got a fever, and ask away. There's nothing too small for Jesus. We shouldn't be afraid to ask him for help. So far we've seen Jesus can heal the big, he can heal the small, and some of you would agree with that. Jesus can heal the big, he can heal the small. But if you're honest, maybe you doubt that he's willing to heal your problems. Maybe you doubt he's willing to heal your issues. Well, look at what he does next in verse 32. Look at how he spends the rest of the Saturday. It says, when evening came, after the sun had set, they brought him to all those who were sick and demon-possessed. The whole town was assembled at the door, and he healed many who were sick with various diseases and drove out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. How does Jesus spend the rest of the day? He was there for all, for the whole town. Jesus isn't just the healer of the big things, not just the healer of the small, he's the healer of all things. Not only that, he's the healer for all people. All right, verse 32, when evening came, after the sun had set, they brought to him all those who were sick and demon-possessed. Look at verse 33. The whole town was assembled at the door. The whole town was there, waiting for him to be healed, waiting for their turn to be healed. Jesus cared about the whole town. He cares about all people. He doesn't just care for the demoniac in the synagogue. He doesn't just care about the people who show up to church who are broken and try their best. To refer to the One Republic song again, the lyric is this: God only helps those who learn to help themselves. That's just not true. That's not true. The lyric should be, God helps all those who can't help themselves. Jesus isn't just for the people who follow him closely. He doesn't just care for Peter's mother-in-law. There was nothing Peter did to win Jesus over to get him to come into his house and heal the mother-in-law. Jesus was just there and he deeply cared for the mother-in-law. Jesus is for the whole town. He cares about each and every person. He says, you're sick, come to me for healing. Jesus' healing is for you. Anyone in the town, he has time for you. The healer of all, and he's the healer for all. What an incredible Saturday. An amazing Saturday. The truth that nothing's too big for Jesus, that nothing is too small for Jesus, and that Jesus is the healer to all, the whole town. But as incredible as that day was, there was another day, another 24-hour period that Jesus displayed his healing power. Another 24-hour period where he healed the big, he healed the small, and there was healing for all. It was on Thursday night that he broke the bread and took the cup and told his disciples that it was his body broken for them and his blood shed for them. The Last Supper with the disciples, previewing what would happen less than 24 hours later, that his body would be broken and his blood would be shed, and it happened. Less than 24 hours later, Jesus was crucified. And it was on that tree that Jesus would take the punishment for our greatest sickness, our sin. Look at what the prophet Isaiah said would happen on this day. Isaiah 53 verse 4, yet he himself bore our sicknesses, and he carried our pains. But we in turn regarded him stricken, struck down by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced because of our rebellion. Punishment for our peace was on him, crushed because of our iniquities. And listen to this, and we are healed by his wounds. The biggest healing that anyone could need had been accomplished. The punishment for sin had been lifted. Jesus healed the biggest sickness humanity faces, and the good news is it's available for all. Anyone who confesses with their mouth Jesus is Lord and believes in their heart that God raised him from the dead will be saved. It was the biggest healing Jesus accomplished, and it was available to all. Not only for the Jews, not only for the people of Capernaum, but for the whole world. But in the midst of that 24-hour period, there was a smaller healing that took place. The night before, Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane after the Last Supper to pray with his disciples. And as they were praying, a group of men came to arrest him. And in this crazy interaction, one of the disciples, I'm pretty sure it was Peter, cut off the ear of a high priest's servant. Pretty crazy event. What did Jesus do? He had compassion for the servant. Jesus put his hand over his ear and healed it. What an amazing thing. That's incredible. Why is that incredible? Because in the midst of Jesus preparing to go to the cross and perform the greatest healing mission of all time, he slows down and heals someone who wants to take him there. In the midst of the hardest 24-hour period of Jesus' life, he slows down to heal this man. This was the greatest day of healing that the world had ever witnessed. Jesus is the healer of our greatest battle, which is sin. But this 24-hour period proved that he's never too busy to slow down for your problem, no matter how insignificant it is. He healed our biggest sickness, and he offered healing to everyone by doing it. And at the same time, he slows down for the small sicknesses as well. So here's my question this morning. How do you need to respond? It's possible that you're sitting in this room and you've never actually received the biggest healing you need. You've never been healed of your sin. Let today be the day that you accept the good news of Jesus Christ, that the biggest sickness and battle you face has been healed by Christ's finished work on the cross. Let today be that day. Maybe you're here this morning and you've received the gospel. You've received healing from your sin. Maybe there's brokenness, though, that you continue to go back to. There's brokenness that you carry around with you, and you need healing. Nothing is too big for Jesus. There isn't a storm that he cannot calm. There's nothing too small for Jesus. There's nothing he doesn't have time for. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your cares on him because he cares about you. Cast your cares on him. He's the healer of the big. He's the healer of the small. There isn't anything too insignificant to cast on him. And maybe you're here this morning and you're doing really well. You're in a good spot. That's great. But here's the challenge this morning. As someone who's been healed by Jesus, maybe you need to walk in the footsteps of Jesus. Jesus sacrificed his entire Sabbath evening to heal the town of Capernaum. Maybe for you, the challenge of this passage is to sacrifice some of your Sabbath or some of your time for people who need it. Maybe there's a Sabbath evening that you end up sacrificing to care for somebody. That's a challenge that hit me in the face this week, and maybe it does for you too. But whichever boat you're in, however you need to respond, Jesus is there wherever you are, whatever point you're at, and will respond. Let's pray. Jesus, you're the healer of big things. You're the healer of small things. And you're the healer of all things. And you have offered healing to anyone by the finished work on the cross. You have given healing to our greatest sickness that we have, our sin. And you rose from the dead so that our relationship that was once separated from you would not be the same anymore. We would be with you and will be with you for eternity. Jesus, you're good. You meet every one of us where we're at. God, help us to cast all our cares on you because you care about us. Jesus, we pray all these things in your name. Amen.